Hi guys, it's been a while. I'm not going to go into detail about why I haven't made content in a year. It's really, I know it's very rude to my subscribers. I really don't deserve any subscribers when I don't make a content in a year, but I'm still glad I have some. So I just haven't been motivated enough. That's it really. It is what it is. Let's move on. Okay. So I have a response to a person called this Bahamian Gyal. And yeah, I'm just going to talk about things like stigmatization and maps. Some of the things you've heard before if you watch my content, but I have some new arguments to throw in every now and then. And before we get to that, I want to share a sort of recent news story that happened in the US. So I'm going to just summarize what happened there. If you want to read the whole story, the link is in the description. I'm just going to give a short summary and then just shortly comment on that because this is quite amazing. This is sort of interesting, I think. So what happened is that there was this 22-year-old guy who chatted with a girl on Tinder. Basically, the girl's Tinder profile indicated that she was 18. Also, you're not supposed to use Tinder unless you're at least 18 years of age. So I think it's fair to assume the guy, the 22-year-old, thought he was talking to an adult. Nevertheless, he was still lured to this local campus where a bunch of like 30 youths or so attacked him physically and just beat him up and accused him of being a pedophile who likes 17-year-olds. Because apparently the girl was only 17, so she had lied her age. I don't know how the guy was supposed to know that, but he was still physically assaulted. Now fortunately the guy managed to escape and authorities sided with him on this. Because to be honest, he didn't do anything wrong. I don't know about you folks, but I think this is sort of unhinged behavior, not gonna lie, from the youths. So this just shows that this kind of a pedophile hunting is really, really popular nowadays among many youths, especially on these trendy websites like TikTok. And they're just so excited about this that when they decide to go on a pedophile hunting mission, apparently sometimes they forget the whole pedophile part, which is amazing. Like you're supposed to hunt pedophiles, right? I don't know about you, but in my opinion, last time I checked, it's not really pedophilia to think that you're talking to an 18-year-old. But whatever, it is what it is. It's just really, really weird times that we are living. And I don't really, despite the fact that the youths are now in trouble, they are the ones who have to really face the consequences. I don't just blame the youths on this. I blame us as a society. Like we've done a tremendous job just sweeping this conversation under the rug. This is completely expected result when that's really how we are dealing with this topic. We are not educating the public, we're not educating the youth on what pedophilia even means, what it means that if someone is a pedophile. We just made it this kind of a boogeyman, and now we're seeing the results. I don't know if you guys knew of this story, but I think I wanted to share that anyway. So let's now talk about the main substance of my contribution, my reaction to this Bahamian Gyal. In fact, I did have to look up how you pronounce Gyal and what does that mean. I assumed correctly that it means girl, and I also guessed that you pronounce it Gyal, but I learned something new. It's apparently Jamaican Creole. So yeah, she has a cool name. I give her that. Now I'm going to play some clips and then I will react.
Yeah, I just killed 5 people, but don't call me a murderer. Call me a life taker. I just sexually assaulted 2 women, but don't you call me a rapist. Call me a body violator. Yeah, I just fantasized about having sex with a kid and I pleasured myself while doing so, but don't call me a pedophile. That's such an ugly word. Call me a minor attracted person.
Yeah, so she's kind of inviting us to play the which one doesn't belong and why game. So I'm going to explain which one doesn't belong. I don't think pedophile belongs there. Because, well, if you are a rapist, you're a murderer, by necessity, by definition, you've done something. You've harmed some people. You've caused victims. I don't think that really is in the same ballpark. If you have feelings, you never chose those feelings. You can possibly control those feelings and live just fine with those feelings and are responsible. By the way, this first clip is not really representative of her video. Fortunately, it isn't that bad. But this beginning is just, I don't know why she needs to throw this in.
So today I'm going to be discussing a taboo topic surrounding one group's attempt to rebrand pedophilia. They want it to be something a little bit more tolerable, palatable, a little bit less offensive, and they want to be referred to as minor attracted persons.
Yeah, in short, they want to have a neutral term to describe them. I think it's normal. Like, if you belong to a population that doesn't have a term like that, that is, the only term is just misunderstood, it's just completely laden with stigma. I mean, I don't know. I don't know about you guys, but I think it's kind of normal from their perspective that they would like to have a neutral term, just like most people generally.
I think it's important to start this conversation out making a clear distinction between a pedophile and a child molester. A lot of times you'll find that people use these two terms interchangeably, and they are two totally different things.
Like I said, her video isn't that bad, really. She has good points, like this is one of them. I give her credit for that, and I wish more people would make the distinction when they are talking about this subject. She's already better than 98% of other anti-pedophiles, so it's very, very nice. Nice of her to actually pay some attention and do some research on this so that she knows what these basic terms mean. So this is super important to understand. I don't want to expand on this too much, like why some pedophile might be non-offending, but there are like so many ways you can make the same arguments. You can think about it from your own perspective as a non-pedophile. It's not just pedophiles who need self-control, it's everyone. Everyone has impulses or feelings or just thoughts that they can't act on for some reason, and most people can control those things just fine. So I think it's kind of stupid and lazy thinking to just assume that like no pedophiles are capable of that same self-regulation that we know that we personally are capable of as non-pedophiles. So she's making a very good point there. Anyway, let's move on.
So let's talk about this MAPS, which a lot of people are rejecting. A lot of people are not interested in calling these people, these pedophiles, MAPS at all. You have some psychiatrists, some psychologists, some anti-sex abuse organizations that are beginning to, and even those in academia are beginning to include this terminology in their literature.
Yeah, I know many people are really not interested in this MAP word at all. And in fact, I'm kind of similar in the sense that I'm very old-fashioned. I like to use the word pedophile. I find that I'm using it all the time, and I just can't use the word map as much as I probably should. But then, on the other hand, I also understand why some people might want to introduce the word. Basically, I see there are two options. Either you fix the word pedophile, which I think this Bahamian Gyal, in all fairness, is trying to do. She's trying to make it clear that there's a distinction between the word pedophile and child molester. So she's kind of consistent in that way. But if there are individuals who feel that it is like beyond redemption, the word is just lost, then the other option is that we have to come up with a new word in our vocabulary, right? And that's where the word map is introduced. I just can't blame really people who feel that the word is lost, so they want to introduce a new word. But whatever, it's neither here or there. I'm just like wondering anyway, like regardless, why is it such a big deal? The word is just supposed to substitute another word whose meaning has radically changed and basically a word that has been completely bastardized. It's not supposed to do anything else, really. I mean, it is. I will get to that part shortly, but I'm going to make this point first. So, like, let's think about the worst case scenario here. That's the way I like to think about things, if it actually is worth it or not. Basically, what we can potentially achieve is that we can further people's understanding of notions like being attracted to minors or children, and people can recognize, for example, the distinction between having those feelings and then acting on it through the use of this kind of language. It just makes people think that, hey, maybe there's a distinction between those feelings and those actions. But what's the worst case scenario? Well, we're just going to get the same like starting position if the word map gets distorted, like if its meaning gets distorted as well, like the word pedophile has. If it undergoes the same mechanisms and processes, we just get to the starting point. We're just at the same point as we are right now, so we don't really lose anything. We can just win something. Furthermore, this Bahamian Gyal mentions academia, how they are using the word map, and this is true. Sometimes they use the word, It shows the word really has some legitimacy. It's not just used by MAPs or MAP activists. There are individuals who potentially have dedicated their entire lives investigating this topic of pedophilia, and they see some value and purpose in that word MAP, so it has to be something. So what could that purpose then be? Well, I think we get a clue when we break it down to its components, the word that is. So it means minor attracted person. When you think about it, it's not really a strict synonym for the word pedophile. The prevalence of MAPs is really like contingent on the age of consent laws, because minor is just someone under the age of consent. What I mean by that is the higher an age of consent in a given country, the more MAPs there are actually. I don't think most people have thought about it this way, but this is just a fact, because MAP is really like a kind of a legal term in a sense, whereas the prevalence of pedophiles exists irrespective of any kind of an age of consent thing. It's just that you're attracted to prepubescence if you are a pedophile, whereas, well, it kind of depends on the country and the legislation whether you are MAP in that country. So what I'm trying to get at is that if you are like a researcher, you want to be very precise with your language, and if you want to like do a very good a study of people who are attracted to minors, you need some kind of a word to describe them. You can't use the word pedophile, right? Because then you're just studying a proportion, if that makes sense.
Not sure if you all remember, but in 2021, Dr. Alan Walker, who is an author and was an assistant professor at Old Dominion University at the time, used the term during an interview with a child protection organization. Well, that clip went viral on TikTok and all hell broke loose. So Walker, who has done extensive research in this area, believes that pedophilia is hardwired in individuals. It's an unchosen thing, that they don't choose to be sexually attracted to children. It's just in them. It's innate.
Alright, so she mentions pedophilia being hardwired, unchosen, and innate as argued by Alan Walker. Is there something about that you disagree? What do you disagree with? Now, when it comes to pedophilia being hardwired, I think it's a bit tricky to say that, because you could argue it's really the predisposition that's hardwired, and then the person later on goes on to develop pedophilia, instead of the pedophilia itself being hardwired. I know that's neither here or there, but I guess you could analogize that to a circumstance where a person with that predisposition is like someone walking on a tightrope, right? They're almost destined to fall, and then in this analogy develop pedophilia. So we could almost say that it's really the pedophilia itself that's hardwired on there, or then it's just the predisposition that makes the person very likely to become pedophile. Either way, there's something very hardwired about that, because this has been studied. As far as I know, I'm not completely up to date on the most recent neurological studies on pedophilia. So if anyone watching this has more like recent data on this, maybe you could enlighten us in the comments section. I would be very, very happy. I've been very, very lazy about doing research on pedophilia in recent years, so that's my bad. But anyway, as far as I understand, the current paradigm still states that it's really like white matter configuration distinctions or anomalies in the brains of pedophiles that causes pedophilia. White matter is like connectivity tissue in brain, and it's contrasted by gray matter. Now, gray matter is really not related to pedophilia at all. In the past, it was thought that it was what caused pedophilia, like some kind of problems with the pedophile's prefrontal cortex. But all those studies really had like very, very grave sampling bias. So later on, when the samples became more representative of pedophiles, they weren't just taking forensic samples. They figured out that it's not really gray matter that causes pedophilia or is related to it. It was just something that in the past studies explained why those people offended against children. So it was really a function of criminality rather than a function of pedophilia itself. Because we know this also in criminal populations, that they have these gray matter problems, like their prefrontal cortex is not working, they don't have impulse control. So what really appears to explain pedophilia is really the white matter deviations or anomalies. Of course, none of this has to mean that it is innate, but there is data that points out that pedophilia might be innate too. For example, it has been discovered that pedophiles are much more likely to be non-right-handed. And we know that handedness preferences are already exhibited in utero. So basically, fetuses who suck thumb with the right hand are more likely to be right-handed when they are born, right? So we know it's very, very early in development where handedness preferences arise, and it's related to pedophilia. So it could be the same mechanism that causes pedophilia is related to the handedness preference. Meaning, again, just pointing out the very, very early etiology. So perhaps just something happens in the womb, hormonal imbalance or something that causes this, because this has also been used as an explanation for homosexuality. No one really knows for sure what causes homosexuality, but one explanation is very similar, that it's really hormonal imbalances in the womb. And this is just goes on to show that really a condition that's innate is not necessarily genetic. That's a very common straw man when someone says homosexuality is innate. They ask you to point out the gene that causes homosexuality when it's not really necessarily genetic at all. Because the environment in womb is still environment. If something happens there and affects a change in the organism and they are born a certain way, it is an innate feature about them, but it wasn't genetic. And yeah, I don't think it's worth going through whether pedophilia is chosen or not. She has to be smart enough to realize it's not. There's no benefit in choosing to be a pedophile. But if you could do that, you could unchoose it. You could become a non-pedophile, and no study has shown that it can be cured, so-called cured. And also, if it could be chosen, we would see this all the time. Some non-pedophiles would just choose to be pedophiles just for the lulz or something. They could just try it out and be like, okay, well, this didn't work out for me. I reverted back to telephile. No, it doesn't work that way for sure. And she has to be smart enough to realize that's not how it works.
And prefers the term minor attracted person because, you ready for this? It carries less stigma. Now, I don't know about y'all. Y'all could tell me how y'all feel down below in the comments section, right? But I don't know that we need to be destigmatizing this thing. Not when we're talking about innocent children.
I thought we were doing that. Like, whatever affects pedophiles is kind of likely to affect children. That's a mantra of mine. I've been repeating that, but I think it has some truth to it. I mean, if you create certain social circumstances that are extremely unfavorable for pedophiles, that might actually affect children negatively. So we have to be very careful about this, how we think about this. Whether we stigmatize pedophiles or not should not be just a kind of a vibes thing. We should make that decision in this kind of an informed way where we analyze the positives and negatives of stigmatization of all pedophiles. You argue that we have to reserve that. I'm of a different opinion. I feel that maybe it would be more rational to just aim the stigma at wrongdoers and like rapists and such. Yeah, basically, just like you make the conceptual distinction between pedophiles and child molesters, I'm saying we should make a moral distinction as well, that it really matters whether these people do any harmful things to kids or not. Like, it's just not consistent to, on one hand, be like, okay, if someone molests a child, that's a meaningful event in the universe. But if a pedophile never does anything like that, they live responsibly. That's just something, oh, we don't even have to talk about that. It's irrelevant. You can't have it both ways. So I'm just saying that based on what I've read on this, I've read a lot on stigmatization in general and stigmatization of pedophiles. And all the findings seem to point out that it has no positives. It only has negatives. Also, all the conversations I've had and debates I've had with people, I've never heard any kind of a valid argument for stigmatization of all pedophiles. And that's what we're talking about here. So if you have one, if anyone listening to this has some kind of a real reason why we have to reserve status quo and just have this blanket blame on all pedos, I'm all ears.
And one of the things that Walker said is that child abuse is, quote, never, ever okay, but that having sexual urges toward children isn't necessarily wrong as long as those carnal desires aren't acted upon.
Making a funny face and then playing a sound effect isn't exactly a critique of what somebody said. But this is exactly what I'm talking about. I'm sure you are against things like child molestation. And now here you give absolutely no credit to these non-offending pedophiles. It's not enough that they don't do anything bad. What do pedophiles have to do really so that it's enough? Do they have to stand on their head or something? Like, whoa, like what is that you demand of pedophiles? What more can they do than be responsible, ethically living individuals?
So let's do a quick poll in the comment section. Let's just do a quick poll, and I'm so serious. Which of you is going to take the chance to leave your kid? And it doesn't have to be your own child. It can be your nieces, your nephews. It can be your godchildren, just the little ones in your lives, okay? Any one of them, or your kids, whatever. Which one of you is going to take the chance to leave your child around someone who has not acted upon their urges, but just has those fantasies and possibly masturbates to the thought of a child? Which one of you? So let's take it away from children for a second. Let's take it away from pedophiles for a second. Let's switch the conversation really quickly to perhaps rapists, right? So I, as a woman, don't want to be in the same space as a man who has said, I've never raped anybody, but I do have sexual fantasies about raping women.
First of all, you aren't describing a rapist, though, but a person with rape fantasies, but we can ignore that. It doesn't matter. Now, this is a case where we see people are really predictable. In conversations about pedophilia, I noticed that anti-pedos often bring up this trust argument, thinking it means something when it doesn't. It's a red herring, and I will demonstrate why. Let's say I own a cat, and I'm going to go away for a couple of days. I need someone to look after my cat. Now, I don't own a car, so I travel to places by bus. I wouldn't trust a fellow passenger on my bus with the task of looking after my cat. This isn't me making the case that there's something morally blameworthy about my fellow passengers. I'm not saying that they couldn't be trustworthy. It's just that I don't know if they are trustworthy, and there's a great difference. And it certainly isn't me making the case we need stigmatization in our city against those who travel by bus with me and whom I don't know. So regardless of stigmatization status, we are completely free to make decisions about whom we trust. We do this all the time, and we don't need to have any group of people dehumanized and segregated in our society like pedophiles are.
Do I want to be in your space when perhaps there's an opportunity and then you go, oh yeah, I'm going to cross over from the fantasy to reality? Yes, pedophilia is the attraction and not the action, but I'm pretty damn sure that a lot of them went from just the attraction to the action. I don't want to take the risk, not with my kid.
But you are taking a risk with children's welfare already. You're implying that the positives of dehumanization of pedophiles outweigh the negatives. That's really what your position entails, and yet we've still to hear one positive aspect about it from you. I'm going to give you an example of what this could look like, potentially. There's this guy called Irate Alex, whom I responded to as my very first response with my YouTube channel. He had an argument for stigmatization of pedos that went something like this. We need it as a deterrence. This way, pedos are less likely to offend, because if they do, they might be caught and they will be exposed as pedophiles, and they have to live with the stigma that comes with that, and they don't want to do that. Now, technically, about half of child molesters are situational, not pedophiles, but we can ignore that. The reasoning here fails regardless, because if they are going to commit the crime of molestation, they have to commit the crime. You can't be an offender without, well, being offender. Duh. So it should serve our purpose just fine to condemn for the act. This way, you achieve the exact same deterrence effect. It's just more efficient that way. So anyway, I'm just trying to give you ideas, this Bahamian Gyal, like what this justification could look like potentially. Just try to make it work, you know.
I don't know if you all remember several years ago, because, we're always talking about terminology and people watering down or trying to sanitize certain evil acts. But several years ago, the Catholic Church was under fire for some child abuse. I think that was well documented all over the world. But you had some Catholic bishops in the United States calling them boundary violations. We're going to call these boundary violations.
Yeah, but there's a great difference between downplaying crime, watering down evil acts, those are your words, by the way, and then having a term that's neutral for innocent people who have done nothing wrong. She keeps doing this, by the way. She makes these comparisons to these offenders who are by necessity criminals who harm others. And then she thinks that is a case against pedophiles when she's really supposed to take into account the fact that some of them are non-offenders. Probably most of them are non-offenders. I mean, that's like making a case against males because some males rape. Come on. Now, just let me just briefly clarify something I just said there, because there are some people who are kind of nitpickers and who might really deliberately misunderstand what I'm saying. When I said the term map is for innocent people, predominantly, I kind of like what I had in mind is that we already have in our vocabulary these terms that we can use to describe wrongdoers that are maps. So I'm not saying all maps are innocent, but that in our vocabulary, we already have words like rapist that we can use for maps who rape. And the reason the word map can be neutral is the exact same reason as the word human can be neutral, despite the fact that rapists are human. The reason is when we condemn them either intellectually, morally, or legally, we condemn them through the act. Not because they are male, not because they are a map, not because they are human beings.
But back to the subject at hand, so these individuals who are trying to get the world to refer to them as maps are looking for a fresh start. They're looking for a fresh start and they're looking for a new home. And not just any home. Oh no, they need a robust and welcoming community to give them shelter from the storm. And guess who they're hoping will let them in? Our good buddies in the LGBT community. But the good folks over there said, hell no, to the no, no, no,
yeah, to the no. First of all, I should like to pose this Bahamian Gyal the question, why shouldn't people who are innocent, who are living responsibly, why shouldn't they have a fresh start? Why can't they have one? And second of all, this Bahamian Gyal doesn't really post any evidence, show any screenshots that this is a real movement among maps that they're trying to get to the LGBT. And even if they are, we don't know at what scale this happens. So far, we just have to take her word for it that this is a real thing. Because we know that anyone can really make a meme image trying to make an association between the LGBT and pedophilia and pedophiles. And we know, in fact, that there are false flags who are anti-LGBT who've been doing this over and over and over for years. Maybe she has seen some of those meme images and just got fooled by them. I mean, some people just fall for fake news. It's normal. We live in a kind of an era where fake news are the fucking main outlet for information for so many individuals. So maybe she's one of them. I don't know. But I have no evidence that there's any large scale, at least a large scale movement among maps trying to get to the LGBT.
Why do people do that, huh? Why do people think the LGB is a catch-all for everyone? Bring your broken, bring your weary.
I don't know. I'm not sure who she's talking about. I personally think it's a catch-all for sexual minorities, which pedophiles are, because they are not a majority. And yes, their preference or condition does pertain to sexuality. Now, some people think pedophilia has got nothing to do with sexuality, but they're wrong. It's got nothing to do with gender, but it's got something to do with sexuality, as in sexual arousal sense, because the word sexual, it has different senses, and that's what these individuals don't get. They just want to play word games when they imply pedophilia has got nothing to do with sexuality. Anyway, I'm not making the definite claim pedophiles should be part of the LGBT. I'm just saying it sort of would make sense. It would be principled from the LGBT to also stand for the more marginalized and less mainstream sexual minorities. Not trying to downplay any discrimination gay folks and trans folks face, because they do face it. And things will go worse. Especially things have gone worse in the US and in many parts of Europe. These reactionary forces are taking control. So things suck. So I'm not trying to make this out to be some competition. But it just kind of sucks that the LGBT is throwing this one sexual minority under the bus just for optics' sake. And that's what it is.
How do we get to this point where we just stop looking out for kids? Innocent, beautiful children. How did we get to this point? Was it political correctness? What was it?
No, it's not that really. I would argue it's really a case of bad prioritization. We as a society way overvalue things like antagonizing pedophiles or just being retributive. And then we have this blame that we extend to all pedophiles. Let's say there are pedophiles who do horrible things, and for a right reason, we are against that. Then we just extend the blame on all pedophiles, because it's just way too much effort to think about it, to be like, okay, well, there might be some individuals with those feelings who don't really act on it. It's just too much hassle. So we are retributive instinctually, and it's just way more gratifying that way. And that's why there are some institutions that don't really work, like sex offender registries that are public. in the US. They are quite popular there. And yet, scientifically, this has been studied. They don't work. They don't protect children as a net effect. But no one cares because it's just, who cares about science? Who cares about thinking these matters through? The downside is that we have these institutions that don't work, and they don't necessarily just not only work, they could be counterproductive. We could create mechanisms in our society that really make it more likely that pedophiles offend against children. And yeah, I do talk about the problems of stigmatization in different videos. I don't want to repeat any of those arguments right now because I have something new. Because I figured this thing out just a few weeks ago. A new argument. So basically, I was at a library reading stuff. I was reading about impulse control disorders because I just wanted to figure out what's going on there psychologically. And based on what I read, I learned that impulse control disorders aren't really related to things like obsessive compulsion or obsessive compulsion disorders. No, in fact, impulse control disorders are more related to addictions. They're like addictions in steroids. That's what impulse control disorders are, according to research. What really feeds addictions and makes them worse is unfavorable conditions in the person's life. Like, for example, if they experience setbacks, if they experience tragedies. Stigmatization in and of itself isn't really like a tragedy. I wouldn't describe it as such, but it is like an ongoing setback in a sense. It's certainly an unfavorable social circumstance. And just like those things that are unfavorable in your life that can cause you to, start drinking, start gambling, all kinds of, problematic addictions can arise. They can also cause impulse control disorder through the same mechanism. And I think like a harsh discrimination against pedophiles certainly is, as potent as any reason that can make a person resort to drinking, using drugs. All right. So, and that's really, really not rational from society to keep doing that. Like have this external mechanism that makes more pedophiles have an impulse control disorder potentially because of what on instinctual level these pedophiles might want to do. This might be a bit more in-depth analysis that most people are really interested in hearing, but even that is not so black and white. We know that people have things like protective instinct and nurturing instinct toward children, and there's no reason to assume pedophiles lack those faculties. Therefore, even on an instinctual and biological level, I would personally argue it's not so clear-cut that they just want to have sex with children, because it might be that I think it's more likely that they have these conflicting instincts. So, just something to think about. Either way, we really don't want to have in our society mechanisms that make it more likely that some pedophiles lose self-control.
I want to share a clip from an interview that WRTV in Indianapolis did several years ago with convicted child predator Jack Reynolds. Reynolds spent more than a decade in prison for molesting children in the 80s. And in this clip, he describes in great detail how he'd go about selecting his targets, his victims. And I came across it and I thought it was worth a share. So take a listen.
Now, I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt that she's just throwing this kind of unrelated thing here because, well, she wants to do good. I think her heart is clearly in the right place. She wants to share this interview so there are individuals who can protect their children better from these predatory adults. And there are really predatory adults out there and we need to protect kids from them. No one is arguing anything else, but and that's fine. I mean, there really is room for this kind of discussion as well. I'm not opposed to her showing the clip. We will not be bothered watching that because it's not really the subject here. But I'm just saying that you can't really take this one anomalous pedophile and then say that, hey, we can look at him and be like, well, let's extend blame on all pedos. Just like we can't take Ped0philes as an example and derive from that some notion that there's something wrong with all people who are attracted to adults. Because Ped0philes wasn't a pedophile. He was attracted to adults, but he was still a monster. And still, not all people attracted to adults are monsters. Duh. I mean, isn't it like it's so clear when I make the case about Ped0philes people attracted to adults. It's just when the subject is pedophiles, this is something I need to keep pointing out. And that's it. That was the last clip. I'm really glad you made it this far. Now, I'm going to just briefly conclude this by just pointing out what she did right and where I think she went amiss. So first of all, this Bahamian Gyal is, I think, one of the most likable individuals I've critiqued. I don't know if you could hear that. Maybe I still sounded a bit too antagonizing and hostile and negative. By the way, sometimes when I go back and just review some of my videos, I find that I do have this habit of just sounding really, really hostile. So I hope that didn't show too much here, because she wouldn't deserve that. Now I'm going to give the positives first and then the negatives. So it's good that she distinguishes between the concepts of pedophile and child molester. And also, I didn't play the clip, but there's a point where she in fact defends Alan Walker about them being cancelled. These are both points that I really didn't expect from her, from an auntie, but she did them anyway, and I commend her for that. Now, the more problematic elements about her contribution is really that I think she failed to establish why pedophiles deserve stigma, what's wrong with the word map, and finally, what's the fundamental problem with the notion that pedophiles might someday be part of the LGBT. I do hope there was some value in my contribution as well, that I could provide some people at least with food for thought. And yeah, I mean, if more people engaged with this topic like me and this Bahamian Gyal, I think we would see much fewer instances of unhinged pedophile hysteria, like the story I shared at the very beginning. And for the pedos and maps watching this, because I know there might be some, because of the subject matter, I will say this. Even though it must really suck to have to listen through all the shit, all the prejudiced, bigoted crap aunties spew about you, I think you can at least take some joy in knowing that the future most likely won't be as unkind and crude toward you as the present. So there's hope. And no matter how vigorously the aunties are trying to take away your basic civil rights, attempts, by the way, which I will continue to oppose, what they can't take away from you is that hope. You can only lose it yourself. So please, don't lose it. That's all I have. Thanks for listening.